Against the maw, Daniel's ordeal, the ascent of Daniel, whispers of envy, the great hall of Ecbatana, a cavernous space of polished obsidian and gleaming gold, hummed with the low murmur of courtiers. Sunlight, fractured into 1,000 dancing motes by the stained glass windows depicting Achaemenid victories, illuminated the raised dais where King Darius held court. His gaze, usually a shrewd assessment of his subjects, softened perceptibly as he turned to Daniel, a man whose bearing was as unyielding as the mountains of his homeland, yet whose eyes held a deep, quiet wisdom. Daniel, a Judean exile, had risen through the ranks not by lineage or wealth, but by a sheer, undeniable brilliance that cut through the intricate web of Persian bureaucracy like a sharpened blade. He advised the king on matters of state, economics, and law, his counsel always proving sagacious and just. King Darius, Daniel, your insight into the treasury's accounts has averted a potential famine in the northern provinces. Your foresight is a gift from the heavens. A warm smile touched Darius's lips, a rare sight for many. Daniel inclined his head, a gesture of respect, not subservience. Daniel, my king, I merely apply the principles of order and diligence that your vast empire requires. Across the hall, amongst the cluster of satraps, Haman's heavily adorned fingers tightened imperceptibly around the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. His eyes, dark as polished onyx, were fixed on Daniel, a cold fire burning deep within them. Beside him, other satraps exchanged furtive glances, their whispers like the rustle of dry leaves in an autumn wind. Satraps whispering, another one. The king favors him above us all. A foreigner, no less. Satraps whispering, he speaks of order, but his presence disrupts the natural order of things. This land is ours, not his. Haman's jaw was clenched, a muscle ticking beneath his trimmed beard. The scent of myrrh and frankincense, usually a soothing presence in the court, felt suddenly acrid to him, tainted by the bitter taste of his own resentment. The Judean's rise was an affront, a constant, glowing ember of insult in his meticulously ordered world. This favor, this trust, was power he believed rightly belonged to him, to them, the true sons of Persia. He envisioned a world where Daniel's calm, knowing gaze would be replaced by the terror of the condemned, where his voice would be silenced forever. The seed of a terrible plot, barely a thought, began to sprout in the fertile ground of his envy. The royal decree, a trap as sprung the air in the private council chamber, was thick with the cloying scent of stale wine and nervous anticipation. Outside, the twilight deepened, casting long, predatory shadows across the mosaic floor. Haman, his voice a low, honeyed murmur, leaned forward, his eyes never leaving King Darius's face. Beside him, the other satraps nodded in well-rehearsed agreement, their collective presence a suffocating blanket in the otherwise spacious room. They had presented Darius with a decree, a seemingly innocuous proposal framed in the language of loyalty and state security. Haman, my king, the loyalty of your subjects is absolute, yet it must be seen. For 30 days, let all within your vast dominion direct their prayers and petitions only to you, the living embodiment of our empire. It would solidify your divine authority, quell any whisper of dissent. The parchment, emblazoned with the royal seal, lay on the polished cedar table between them. Darius traced the intricate patterns with a hesitant finger. The idea at first seemed a grand gesture, a testament to his power. But a nagging unease gnawed at him, a faint discordant note in Haman's persuasive symphony. He thought of Daniel, his unwavering devotion to his own God. This decree would ensnare him. King Darius for 30 days. It is a significant demand. What if some, by their customs, cannot comply? Another satrap, a burly man named Gabrias, stepped forward, his voice gruff, yet carefully respectful. Gabrias, my king, it is a test of unity. Any who defy it demonstrate a fundamental disloyalty. The penalty, as dictated by ancient law, is the lion's den. Unchangeable, irrevocable, as are all Medo-Persian laws. Haman, indeed. The law, once sealed, cannot be altered, not even by the king. This ensures its strength, its justice. It protects you from the very appearance of favoritism. The trap was well laid. The words unchangeable and irrevocable were the final, heavy stones sealing Daniel's fate. Darius stared at the quill, its feather plume a dark sentinel against the light. His hand trembled slightly as he took it, the weight of the empire heavy on his shoulders. He considered Daniel's face, etched with integrity, then the glint in Haman's eye cold and unyielding. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his vast kingdom, Darius pressed the quill to the parchment. The scratch of the pen on the thick paper was the only sound, a sharp, definitive cut through the oppressive stillness. As he lifted the quill, Haman's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile, a flash of triumph that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The decree was sealed. The trap was sprung. The unyielding spirit, defiance in prayer, a gentle breeze, redolent with the distant scent of the king's rose gardens, stirred the heavy silk curtains in Daniel's chamber. The late afternoon sun, a fiery orb sinking towards the western horizon, cast long, golden fingers across the intricate patterns of the Persian rug. 3 times a day, as was his custom, Daniel would open his window not for the breeze, but for the direct gaze of Jerusalem, his heart's true north. Today, however, the act carried a weight heavier than devotion. It was an act of deliberate, profound defiance. He knelt, his aged knees finding their familiar place on the cool, woven fibers. His hands, gnarled with years of service and the wisdom they had earned, clasped together, strong and steady. No tremor ran through him, no fear shadowed his calm, resolute face. He knew the decree, the swift, brutal penalty it carried. The hushed whispers of his servants, the fearful glances from passers-by in the palace corridors, had painted a clear picture of the satrap's trap. Yet the thought of altering his ancient practice, of bowing his knee to a mortal king in a gesture that would deny his God, was an impossibility, a betrayal of his very essence. The city sounds drifted up from below, the distant braying of donkeys, the faint cries of street vendors, the clatter of a passing cart. But for Daniel, all sounds faded, replaced by the silent rhythm of his own beating heart and the whispered words of his prayer. His voice, though low, carried through the open window, a melody of ancient supplication, clear and unwavering. He made no attempt to conceal it. Indeed, his open window was an affirmation, a public testament. Daniel, O God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I come before you not in fear of man, but in humble adoration. Let your will be done as it is in heaven, so on earth. Protect your people, guide your servants, and let your name be glorified above all earthly kings. A shadow detached itself from the wall across the narrow alleyway, moving with the stealth of a desert fox. 2 figures, cloaked and hooded, pressed themselves against the rough stone. Their eyes, slits in the darkening fabric, were fixed on Daniel's window, on the man kneeling within, his lips moving in forbidden prayer. A low, satisfied grunt escaped one of them. The other nodded, a grim smile barely visible beneath his hood. The evidence, clear as the ringing of a temple bell, was now undeniably theirs. The trap had closed. Daniel, in his unwavering faith, had walked directly into it, his spirit unyielding to the earthly power that sought to crush it. Darius's torment, justice, and the law's cruelty, the first rays of dawn, usually a welcome sight, sliced through the ornate windows of Darius's private chambers like shards of ice. He had not slept. The royal bed, a vast expanse of embroidered silks, felt like a bed of thorns beneath him. The taste in his mouth was of ashes, a bitter reminder of the decree he had signed, the irreversible words of law that now condemned a man he deeply respected. He paced the room, the silent thud of his slippers on the marble floor the only sound in the suffocating stillness. The previous evening, the satraps, led by Haman, had burst into his presence, their faces a mixture of feigned righteousness and barely concealed triumph. They spoke of Daniel's defiance, of witnesses who had seen him, heard him, praying to his God, brazenly flouting the new law. Haman, my king, Daniel has been caught in the act. He prayed to his God 3 times by his window, facing Jerusalem. It is a clear violation of your decree. Darius had felt a chill creep into his bones, colder than any winter wind. He had tried desperately to find a loophole, a legalistic reprieve. He summoned his wisest scribes, his most learned jurists. He had even, in a moment of frantic hope, considered outright command, a kingly revocation. But the Medo-Persian law was absolute, a rigid framework that bound even the monarch who enacted it. To violate it was to unravel the very fabric of his empire, to invite chaos. King Darius, but he is innocent of any true crime. His loyalty to me is beyond question. This law, it was not intended for such as him. Another satrap, his voice dripping with false sympathy, stepped forward. Satraps, my king, the law makes no distinctions. To show favoritism, even to Daniel, would undermine your authority. It would declare your decree to be mere suggestion, not absolute law. What would the common mans think then? What would the other provinces infer? Haman indeed majesty. Justice cold and impartial must be served. Otherwise, where is the order? Where is the science of governance? The decree states the penalty. It is irrevocable. Darius had buried his face in his hands, the weight of his crown suddenly unbearable. He, the absolute ruler of the known world, was utterly powerless against the very system he commanded. The morning light, no longer merely cold, felt like a judgment, an executioner's blade. He could hear the distant rumble of the city stirring, the grim preparations for the day's terrible task. He had until sunset to save Daniel, to find some way to circumvent the unyielding decree, but with every passing moment, the hope drained from him, replaced by a growing dread. The law meant to bring order was now a cruel, inflexible maw devouring the man he had called friend. He was caught in the crucible of his own making, his affection battling the brutal, impersonal force of his own justice. The maw of night, trial in the lion's den, the stench hit first, a rank, visceral assault of stale blood, decaying meat, and the musk of caged predators. It clung to the humid night air, a suffocating shroud that pressed down on the assembly gathered at the mouth of the lion's den. Below, in the inky blackness, guttural growls rumbled, a chorus of primal hunger. Torches, held aloft by grim-faced guards, flickered wildly, painting monstrous, shifting shadows on the high, rough-hewn stone walls. The chasm yawned, a gaping wound in the earth, its depths promising only agony and oblivion. King Darius stood at the precipice, his face a mask of profound despair, illuminated by the flickering flames. His hands trembled, not with cold, but with a bone-deep agony. He had arrived, his last desperate hope extinguished, to oversee the inevitable. Daniel stood before the king, his head unbowed, his eyes serene, reflecting the torchlight without fear. The guards, their movements stiff with apprehension, grasped Daniel's arms. King Darius, voice hoarse, barely a whisper, "Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." Daniel offered a small, knowing smile, a flicker of peace in the face of absolute terror. He was led to the edge. Below, eyes, dozens of them, gleamed like malevolent embers in the darkness, fixed on the figures above. A low, hungry snarl rippled through the den, closer now, a promise of swift, tearing death. The air vibrated with the raw power of the beasts. One massive lion, its fur matted with grime, let out a terrifying roar that shook the very ground, its breath a hot, foul gust of wind. Its claws, long and curved, scraped against the stone floor below. The other lions began to pace, their heavy bodies thudding against the unseen walls. Daniel took a breath, his shoulders square. The guards, with a rough shove, pushed him forward. He tumbled into the abyss. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, quickly stifled by the rising chorus of roars. The thud of his body hitting the den floor was sickeningly audible. A primal scream caught in Darius's throat. He squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the sight. Then an unnatural silence fell. The roars, the snarls, the terrifying thud of paws all ceased. The only sound was the frantic beating of Darius's own heart and the distant, unseen flicker of the torches. He cautiously opened his eyes. Below, in the deepest shadows, Daniel stood. Unharmed. The lions, massive, terrifying beasts that moments ago promised savage death, were now curled at his feet or lay motionless, their eyes fixed not on him with hunger, but with an eerie, unblinking stillness. It was a silence that spoke not of peace, but of a profound, cosmic interruption, a defiance of natural law, an unholy stillness that was far more terrifying than their previous roars. The horror now was not of death, but of something utterly inexplicable, something beyond human comprehension, a chilling testament to a power that mocked the very laws of their world. Dawn's revelation, retribution, and acknowledgement, the pre-dawn chill was biting, cutting through Darius's heavy robes as he raced through the palace corridors, his torch casting frantic, dancing shadows. Sleep had been an impossible torment, each fleeting moment filled with images of Daniel's descent into the roaring blackness. The taste of despair was a constant companion. Guards, startled by the king's desperate haste, scrambled to open the heavy gates leading to the lion's den. The air still carried the scent of the beasts, a lingering promise of savagery. King Darius, voice strained, raw with fear, "Daniel, servant of the living God. Has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" The words echoed into the deep, dark maw of the den, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Darius leaned over the precipice, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He squinted into the gloom, straining to see beyond the flickering light of his torch. Daniel, voice calm, miraculously clear, "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O King, I have done no harm." A wave of dizzying relief washed over Darius, so profound it almost buckled his knees. Daniel, alive, unharmed. He peered down, and there he was, standing amongst the massive, now docile creatures, their eyes still holding that unnatural stillness. It was a miracle beyond all understanding, a direct, undeniable defiance of the world's most brutal laws. "King Darius, bring him up immediately. Lift him out." Guards scrambled, lowering ropes and a sturdy basket. As Daniel was pulled to safety, blinking in the dim light of the nascent dawn, Darius clutched him, a rough, emotional embrace. His eyes, however, quickly hardened. The betrayal, the cunning, the cold ambition of Haman and his confederates now burned in his mind with renewed clarity. King Darius sees Haman and his men, and their families. "Bring them before me." The royal guards, their faces pale with a mixture of fear and awe at Daniel's survival, moved swiftly. Haman and the conspiring satraps were dragged before the king, their earlier arrogance replaced by a terrified understanding of their fate. Their pleas, their desperate attempts to bargain, died in their throats as Darius's gaze, now sharp and unforgiving, fell upon them. "King Darius, they set this trap. They sought to destroy an innocent man. Let them face the justice they prescribed for others." The same guards, no longer hesitant, dragged Haman and his entire household, along with the families of the other satraps, to the gaping mouth of the den. Below, the lions, which had been so unnervingly still in Daniel's presence, now began to stir, their low growls escalating into a ravenous, blood-curdling roar. The scent of fear, raw and potent, filled the air. The screams that followed were swift, brutal, and short-lived, swallowed by the insatiable maw, a grim, undeniable retribution. The dawn, which had promised revelation, now delivered a terrible, undeniable acknowledgement of a higher justice. The everlasting decree, a kingdom transformed days later, the great hall of Ecbatana, once a stage for whispered conspiracies, now thrummed with a different kind of energy, reverence and awe. King Darius sat upon his throne, no longer burdened by the torment of an unjust law, but radiating a new, profound conviction. The shadow that had fallen over his court had lifted, replaced by the clear, unwavering light of an undeniable truth. Daniel stood by his side, not as a condemned man, but as a beacon, a living testament to a power beyond any earthly kingdom. The assembled nobles and officials, still shaken by the recent events, listened with rapt attention as Darius unrolled a freshly inscribed scroll, its parchment crisp, its words destined to echo through the ages. "King Darius, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, may you have abundant peace." A hushed silence fell, pregnant with anticipation. "King Darius, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, he who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." Darius's voice, powerful and resonant, filled the vast hall, each word a hammer blow against the old order. He looked at Daniel, a deep respect shining in his eyes. The wisdom, integrity, and faith that had always set Daniel apart were now vindicated, not just by survival, but by divine intervention that had shaken the very foundations of the empire's understanding of power. The world, as they knew it, had shifted on its axis. Daniel's destiny, intertwined with the fate of the vast Persian Empire, was now profoundly altered. He continued to prosper, serving Darius and later Cyrus the Persian, his influence solidified not by earthly might, but by the undeniable manifestation of a higher power. The decree issued from the throne of the most powerful king was not merely a political edict, but a philosophical statement that true power, enduring and unyielding, resided not in human laws or the might of empires, but in spiritual conviction and righteous judgment. The echoes of those terrifying roars in the den, and the subsequent inexplicable silence would forever remind them of a God who delivered, a kingdom transformed.